I'd like to start with one of my favorite Paul David Tripp quotes. God's design in our pain enables us to look back and say, He loves me enough to take me where I would have never wanted to go in order to produce in me what I never could have achieved on my own. When I was asked to share my testimony, at first I was overwhelmed. How do you encapsulate over 60 years in 5 minutes? But when I started looking back, a main thread through my life has been that God has shown His love and His faithfulness to me in spite of the circumstances that I find myself in. My parents became Christians a few short months after I was born. Perhaps they realized they needed a little extra help. I was a premature NIC baby, and I didn't stop crying or screaming for months. This was before doctors understood what that was, and I was the knee baby in the family that would eventually have 5 kids. My sister encouraged them to attend a revival service at a local Baptist church in Zeeland, Michigan. Maybe there was free babysitting. My understanding is that from that day forward, our family changed. When I was 4 years old, my mom sent me down the street to a church that was having a vacation Bible school. I was the first child in the family to ever attend one, and I remember vividly that it was a morning VBS with crafts and snacks. I loved it. However, that final Friday morning, we gathered to listen to the pastor, and he told us the gospel, and it really shook me up. I had never heard of a place called hell, and I was terrified. I knew that I was headed in that direction because even at 4 years old, I understood that I could be a naughty little girl sometimes. I was too shy to go forward, but when I got home that day, I was clearly upset. Over a grilled cheese sandwich and, yes, tomato soup, my mom asked me why I was so upset. I told her, and she lovingly, gently led me to the feet of Jesus. She told me that He loved me and always had, and even though I knew I could be naughty sometimes, He cared about me. That was the start of my journey with Jesus. In high school, I remember vividly realizing that I said I was a Christian, but that when it came to my life and my future, I wasn't including Him in any of my plans. I didn't really think about serving Him. Although I never did anything rebellious in high school or against my parents, I knew that something wasn't quite right. I was headed to the State University to study music, to become a professional musician and a performer as a career, and that I was not going to let anything get in my way. I had great plans for my future. The problem was that I never prayed about it or considered what God thought. So He broke a finger in a freak accident, and it got my attention. It was just before a major competition. I cried out to God, "Why are you doing this to me? There's so much hanging on this competition." In the middle of the night, He spoke, "You belong to me, and I gave you any talents or gifts that you have as a gift to be used for me. I love you, and I want you to serve me." I was in His grip. After a few months of intense therapy, I did regain the use of my hand, and I did compete. But I knew that it was God helping me, and shortly after that, I decided to go to Moody Bible Institute to major in church music in piano. It was while I was there that I met Mark Kellner, a crazy, talented writer and performer, and during the process of writing music for my recital, we fell in love and took a semester off to get married. We had 5 kids. We did music and worship ministry all over, including Indiana, Chicago, Nebraska, Nashville, Florida, Georgia, and Wheaton, Illinois. I have 2 kids in the ministry, And all of them do this music thing. And believe me, while they were growing up, our house was always noisy. Mark and I moved here in the summer of 2014 when he took a position as a worship pastor at the First Evangelical Free Church on the west side of town. A very short 8 months later, just as we were about to become empty nesters, he suddenly, and with no warning, exited this world to do worship face to face with his Savior. Waking up to find him gone that morning in February, my world was turned upside down. But it also started a chapter of more intense walk of faith. Totally different than I could ever have expected. So, my world became one of shock, loss, anger, intense and physical grief. I lost my house. I lost all of my future dreams. Chronic pain and my sense of identity, for not only did I lose my sweetheart, but I lost my ministry partner as well. The kids were all going through the same thing, but from far away. I felt like I was cut adrift. But then, God used a friend, also a widow, to lead me to Romans 12:12, which says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." She said that if I would try to follow these few words, remembering them when the waves of grief and loss tended to drown me out, that it would help me get through the coming days, months, and years. So some days I could do one of those things, maybe patient in affliction, but never all three. And that was okay, because eventually I could be joyful in the hope of heaven and that future that meant. And eventually God and I started talking again, but it took time. It has been 8 years of learning to live alone for the first time in my life, of traveling alone without tears, of using a broken heart to worship God, of looking at the future differently, and of gradually understanding that God's plan for my life was still beautiful and that I can still trust Him. A few years ago, after suffering several miscarriages, my daughter Abigail sent me this verse, or these verses, that she was claiming for the coming year. The truth of it is something I hang on to every day. It's from 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 18. That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small, and they won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them, and it will last forever. So we don't look at the trouble we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things that we now see will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. So I remain, as always, in His grip.